colliding ideas, colliding characters, colliding stories. Can you just touch on that a little bit more? Because I think it's so powerful. Like we just did it with Rocky and Harry Potter. I don't know what that character would be, but that could be the germ to start something bigger. You know, it could be the genesis of another character where, you know, all of a sudden Harry Potter learns how to fight and he's also a wizard. So MMA Harry Potter?
Yeah,
like
maybe,
why
totally,
why not?
Yeah.
But he wrestles dragons instead, so he fights dragons physically.
Yeah.
Now you see it's going.
Okay. That's the imagination. I love it. The imagination was just going, and this is what happens with colliding ideas. So the idea is it's almost like a physics thing. You know, you've got these two atoms and they collide together, and as they collide, they spark, and there's that spark that just gets ideas going and gets the creative juices flowing, and then you can create something that's it's quite unbelievable once that spark happens. But if you're just sitting there with the one idea and the other idea and you don't collide them together, you don't create something. It's actually, I mean, it goes back to the sort of idea of thesis and antithesis create together, you create synthesis. There's this kind of, deep theory of this, which is it's very academic, but the idea is that when you collide two almost opposites together, it's a bit like juxtaposition. You spark off something that is then the imagination well. I call it like a geyser. It like spurts out, and it's like, oh my, you can't stop it. I mean, this Harry Potter Rocky thing, I don't know. I'm probably never going to forget it, and who knows where it's going to end up one day. But it's like they're totally random, but you collide them, and then you've got this. And what happens is, then it becomes not just a character but a story, because you started plotting earlier. You weren't even talking about the character. You were plotting a whole story with MMA and dragons. He's got to fight the dragons, and so what happens is like suddenly the plot starts coming from these characters that we've collided together. And that can be really, really powerful.
That is. Well, that was how like Indiana Jones was created, like an archaeologist who goes around the world getting whip wielding. That was literally Spielberg and Lucas on a beach. Yeah, and they were just like, hey, why don't we make a movie about an archaeologist who goes around treasure hunting? Like, wouldn't that be cool? And he's got a whip and a fedora. And and from there, the rest was born.
Exactly.
It's pretty insane. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests.
I'm terrified. I know what's coming.
All right, so prepare yourself. Okay. But before we do that, you actually told me an amazing, and it's a humbling story. About how you heard about me, and I'm not, and I want to just, I'd love for you to tell the story on air, because it's just something I've never had that happen to me, so I think it's a really cool idea, a really cool story. So if you could tell me, that would be awesome.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to draw from my memory well and tell you a story about what happened. So I live in a place called Muizenberg, which is basically like Venice Beach in Cape Town in South Africa, except much smaller, but there's kind of wide streets, lots of skateboarders, lots of surfers, and there was this coffee shop that I sometimes work at, and I'm working there, working on some courses from the book, and I see this guy next to me, and he's got a laptop open, and it's got an editing suite on, so it's got like Premiere, he's editing something, and which is probably also a bit like Venice Beach in LA. Everyone's just always working on scripts or movies, or like it's everywhere. And so he's working on this thing, and I say to him, hey, how's it going? Because I always want to meet people. That's the other thing. I'm always just meeting people. It's really good advice, by the way, is like meet people all the time. But so I approach this guy and I say like, oh, you're doing some edit work. What are you working on? He's a stills photographer who's moving into video, and we start talking. And I say, I've got this book. And he goes, oh, it's amazing. Come take a picture, Instagram. He Instagrammed me with the book. And then I said that I've also got this podcast, because I've also started podcasting, because podcasts are amazing. Awesome. And I've started the Three Wells podcast, which is, and anyway, I mentioned this to him, and he says, have you heard of Indie Film Hustle? And I go, I don't think it rings a bell, but I don't think I've, and he says, you've got to listen to it. It's amazing. So this guy in the tip of Africa, oh my God, in the small little town called Muizenberg, is telling me about Alex Ferrari. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I'll check it out. And he gets my phone, and I start listening to it, and I'm like, oh, this is great. I love what this guy's doing. Alex Ferrari is amazing. So I write Alex Ferrari on my whiteboard in the tip of Africa. I write your name.
Amazing. That's ridiculous.
On my whiteboard, like, contact Alex Ferrari. So I'm thinking like, how am I going to contact him? I could email him out of the blue. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm in this sort of joint session with other Michael Visser Productions, who's my publishers, and they're really good. It's a bit of a family publisher, and we all meet with each other. And suddenly this woman, Diane Bell, who's a friend of yours, is on this, thing with me, and she says, "Oh, you guys should meet with Alex Ferrari." And I'm like, "Yes!" I was like, "Yeah, I want to meet with him." And that's how I ended up sitting here in Johannesburg, South Africa, talking to you in LA. It's like
I find it's humbling, but I've never heard a story, and it's just I wanted to bring it out because I wanted to make a point of it, which is you never know as a creator, as an artist, as a writer, what your work will do in the world, where it will reach, who it will reach, at what point it will reach them. So I'm here in Los Angeles. I sit here in my cave with this little microphone, and Yoda's in the background. Yes, my life-size Yoda's in the background, and I sit there and I talk on this, into the ether, and yet. That story is so amazing to me because some guy who I've never met in a coffee shop in Johannesburg he was
in Cape Town.
Excuse me, sorry, in Cape Town, and he's telling you about my podcast, which then and then how everything worked out is amazing. So I always tell artists, I always tell writers and filmmakers, it is your responsibility to get your work out there. It's your responsibility to tell your stories because you have no idea the impact that your story will have on another human being. It could be just one person who watches a movie you write, watches a television episode, watches a short film that you direct or a feature or whatever content you create, and it can change their life. And I'm not saying that I changed your life or anything like that. I'm just saying as a general statement that our art, our work has the potential to do something like that. So I thank you for being.
I think that's amazing.
I thank you for telling that story. I wanted to make that point.
No, it's good because the other thing is like when you're in the flow of creativity as well, these things happen. I don't know if you've found this, but once you start just creating and doing and putting stuff out there, suddenly, what you've been doing is like you're just putting stuff out there, and like things start happening and the flow happens, and the next thing you know, I'm talking to you, and like it's like incredible how that happens, but it's got to do with like unblocking and flowing,
I'll tell you what, when I launched Indie Film Hustle 3.5 years ago, I was blocked. The doors were shut to me. I couldn't talk to anybody, anything. All of a sudden, because I decided to give back and start building Indie Film Hustle up, I have now options to talk to people that I've never in a million years would have, if I would have just, maybe if I would have emailed you out of the blue, I'm like, "Hi, I'm a filmmaker. Can I talk to you for an hour and just like pick your brain?" Like that's not something that you would do. But because of me just putting stuff out there constantly, doors swing open all the time. And I get to have this amazing experience with having a conversation with you on the other side of the world about screenwriting, which is, wonderful. And then on top of that, our conversation is now going to be shared with hopefully tens of thousands of people around the world. And hopefully it will make an impact in their life one way, shape, or form. So it's a wonderful place to be.